I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Whenever I was restarting from coming off a hiatus from doing the podcast, you're like the first person that came to mind where I was like, I have to interview Morgan. Like, I have to have her on the show.
That is so thoughtful. I really appreciate that. And I'm so excited.
You're listening to The Holistic Ritual, a podcast for holistic health-minded humans seeking mind, body, spirit well-being. Hosted by Kamala Celeste, IIN holistic health coach and former personal trainer, with over a decade of experience helping humans become the best versions of themselves, both mentally and physically. Here, you'll discover meditations, affirmation readings, thought-provoking insights, and all things related to holistic health and healing. We blend Eastern and Western rituals, practices, and research to guide you on your wellness journey. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
So, Morgan, if someone has never met you, didn't know anything about the work that you do, how would you describe that? And how would you describe a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I was thinking about this question last night, and I was thinking what I tell my nephews. In short terms, I help people. I'm a therapist, and specifically, I call myself a spiritual therapist. And what that means is I help people through a clinical mental health framework, but there is that spiritual component there if that's important to you. I'm also an intuitive reader, and I also write. Something I love about my work and the way that I help people is that it's multifaceted and it keeps things interesting. So when I write, it's through self-expression. With therapy, it's through talk therapy. With spirituality, it's through intuitive readings. So I wear a lot of different hats, but I would say I help people with their mental health and spiritual health.
Yes. No, I love that. I love just the combining of mental health and spirituality, and like it's such a unique thing that you do. So let's talk about your Substack.
Okay.
So you're a writer, you have a pretty successful Substack. It's funny, it's witty, it's very
Those are
transparent.
some words to describe it.
How has writing and like telling your story, how has it shaped you and how has it shaped the work that you do?
Yeah. I I wanted to write for a long time. I, like, wrote when I was little and journaled and started a Substack, or not a Substack, but a blog when, I was in my earlier 20s, and I always felt like you needed something like a degree or a certain class to be a writer, and I just really had this reckoning in the last year of like, "Wait, the only thing I need to be a writer is to actually write and be dedicated, and that is something I'm capable of." So, almost a year ago, last February, Substack was just coming into my viewpoint, and I thought it'd be a great way to start expressing myself. I was really getting burnt out with the short term or the short form content like TikTok
Yeah.
and Instagram Reels. So I thought writing would be a great way to express myself and not be that like quick make a video every single day.
Yeah.
It's really helped me process things emotionally. Um, just kind of tap into my creativity because I always thought I wasn't a creative or an artist, but taking on the role of a writer has really helped me realize how creative I actually am and how really all of us are creative beings. It's just about finding your, like, for example, you with your podcasting, it's finding your thing that it doesn't have to look like you sit down and you have your own art studio. Like, of course it can. So it's really helped me just tap into a different part of myself and really push the bounds of self-expression because I do write about taboo topics like sexuality and spirituality. So it definitely I write, I feel like, with a sense of comfort, but that's not how it is always behind the scenes because I'm like, "Should we write about this? Like, should we take it to that level?" And there are still things that I'm kind of sitting on that I want to, like, push the envelope, but I think I'm still figuring out who I am as a writer and what's really clicking with the audience, and I've realized that when I, like, spill the tea on my own life, that's really what gets people in, and honestly, like, that's fair, like, we like drama as humans, and if you're reading my stuff because you wanna know, like, what's going on with an ex or something, I I think that's totally fair because I think it's relatable and I really enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, I think something that you said was like, I don't need any type of degrees. I don't need any special things. I just need to write to be a writer. I think that's so important for people who are just struggling with, I need all of these like degrees or certifications or something. And like, to be a doctor, yes, you
Right.
obviously need a medical degree, but to do something that people are passionate about, like just dropping the I don't know, the pressure that you don't know enough right now. And like you have so much knowledge and like you're the most qualified to help the person that you were like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So
It kind like when I'm in certain headspaces, I can get kind of annoyed when I see on TikTok of people like, just start. Like all you have to do is just start when you feel like intimidated by something. But there really is so much truth to that. You just have to do the first post and then the second post and then the third thing, and then you'll get your flow. But I think it really speaks to like the practice of vulnerability and being embarrassed of,
yeah.
you will never be successful unless you make that risk of being vulnerable and possibly being embarrassed. There are things that I've put out, a few years ago where I'm like, oh God, that was cheesy. Like a reel or something, where it's like that was the culture of the internet 3 years ago. But looking at it now, you're like, oh my God, I need to archive this. Like I have so much cringe. But like that's how you get to where you are now.
Yeah.
You just have to do it.
Yeah, I know there's so many
Oh
embarrassing
my
things
God.
that I've looked at on my Instagram. That's where I first started online, outside of like the blog space. But
Mhm.
yeah, so cringy. And I'm like, why did you do that? So I know you are also a tarot reader, you're a psychic, and I can't wait to ask you so many more things about that. But I'm hoping, so I have a tradition on the show to open up with some kind of grounding or affirmation. But I was hoping that you would do like a mini collective tarot read for us.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I was thinking my intention could be just what do your listeners need to know right now? We'll keep it very general.
Yeah.
So I'll pull a few cards right now.
I love it. And then I see you have a couple of decks over there. One's Oracle, and then this is your tarot deck. Oh, so she has Anatomy of a Witch Oracle. And then tarot deck. These are so cool. And then for those of you who are just listening, Morgan has just pulled the Four of Pentacles, then the Seven of Swords, and the last one is the Devil, which isn't always bad. And then now she's incorporating the Oracle deck. And from the Oracle deck, she pulled the Witch Braid and the Serpent. I'm so interested to hear your take on this.
Okay, cool. I had to put my mic down for a second. Let me just take a minute with these. So the first thing I was hearing with the Four of Pentacles is loosen your grip. This can be a card where you have a really tight hold on things. It could be like you're sort of like hoarding your money, you're afraid to spend it, or you're afraid to sort of put yourself out there. I was really getting this vibe of and take what resonates and leave the rest. This may not land for everyone. This is just a collective intention of whoever's listening to this. This could be for you. There's a message of you're being really hard. You could be being really hard on yourself right now. With the Devil, I was just sort of seeing, and the Devil's not inherently bad. We all have this. It's sort of like a shadowy card. It can speak to sort of how I'm picking it up right now. It can mean a lot of different things, is like a negative thinking about self. And it sort of feels like with the Serpent card here, you're being hard on yourself and no one really knows about it. I sort of feel like you're kind of keeping it to yourself, like kind of putting it in a lockbox of like, I'm having these harder thoughts on myself of I should be doing this, I should be doing that, whatever your thoughts are. And they're sort of like, but I don't maybe want other people to know. And sometimes tarot comes out and it's a really positive, lighthearted. I'm just kind of following the message here. It just feels like you need to give yourself a break if you can. I know that's easier said than done. And maybe sharing with someone if those thoughts are a little bit tougher right now. Yeah, that's what I'm getting initially. Yeah.
That definitely hit home for me. It's often said like we are our own worst critics,
Yeah.
but I think definitely struggling with some like body image stuff over the last few months. So that resonates with me personally, but working through that.
Yeah.
Journaling.
Yeah. I will say probably we all deal with these negative thought loops. And for me, kind of what's coming up personally is sometimes I get scared to share about what I'm going through mentally because I don't want to be seen as, oh, she's a mental health professional, but she's having dark thoughts or
So human though.
yeah, right. Right. And so it's kind of like we have to show that we're human too, but it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. So yeah, that definitely resonated for me too. Thank you for letting me do that. Can we do one like more like just like a maybe advice or so we're not leaving on such a
Yeah, okay. I love that.
we have this is the advice here. If you resonated with the first part of that message, the Chariot, Nine of Swords, and Knight of Cups. Nine of Swords also speaks to that anxiety. We're not going to get into that. I already, you can kind of feel if this is for you or not. With the Knight of Cups, I was sort of seeing this as someone in your life. It can be romantic, platonic, someone that loves you. I was getting this message for a client a couple of days ago. Believe other people when they tell you how much they value you or how cool you are or how sweet they think you are. Really believe other people when they speak affirmations onto you. Knight of Cups is a very like sweet, romantic energy. And I feel like sometimes we really just need to get out of the driver's seat of our own life and let someone else pour into us and try our really our best to receive that. Okay, that's the message.
Aw. Yeah, that was perfect. And
Thank you for letting me do that.
no, it was so fun.
I got to get out of the reading because I can keep going.
Wait, no, so let's talk about that. When you read for someone, tapping into your psychic abilities and just like how do you sift through those messages that come in? Like, how do you really focus on, no, this is the message that's coming in just for this person? Or I know collective readings are probably a little bit, I'd assume, more challenging
Yeah.
because collectively, not everybody is experiencing the same thing, even though we're all experiencing the human existence, but all in like different forms. So, yeah, how do you tap into that?
I feel tarot and oracle is something where I can gaze at it. And let me preface by saying we all have psychic abilities. It really is about fine tuning them. So if you want to learn how to be more psychic, you could definitely do that. It's strengthening a muscle. It's a form of communication. I kind of like to think of it as learning a different language. So I am not special. I am not the chosen one. We all can do this. So for me, tarot and oracle helps me sort of like gaze at something. I take the original meaning of the tarot card or what the oracle card is saying, and then I pair it with psychic channeling. So for me, this is clairaudience. There's all these different types of clairsentience, clairvoyance. For me, my main clair, as you can Google this, it's very like accessible information, is I hear messages. So for example, what the cards just came out, I saw 4 of Pentacles. I immediately heard in my inner mind is what I say, someone's being too hard on themselves. So then it's little like blips of information. I'm not hearing like a full channel, but like I'll hear little like pings of words, or sometimes I will experience clairvoyance. So like I'll see something in my mind's eye, like when you're meditating and I like visualize a grass field, it's kind of like that. So maybe I'll see like a playground or a leaf or just little like messages that I'll work with the client to sort of ping together.
Yeah.
So what I just did, that collective message, like I do believe there's a message in there for someone, but it is a little bit easier. Like if I were to actually like do a reading for you right now, and you could fill me in when I'm talking about, like you kind of just did, like I've been struggling with body image. Okay, that would give me more information. Then I could look at the cards, hear the messages. It's like building a puzzle piece. It's like building a Lego set. I get excited and talk about it.
I love it. I love it so much.
Because I think oftentimes we expect intuitives to, okay, you're going to get this job on this date at this time. It's going to look like this, these very specific messages. But I find it's actually more empowering to have this collaborative approach with clients, to be like, okay, I'm sensing some anxiety in work. Maybe can you tell me a little bit about that? Oh yeah, I just got laid off or something. And then you work together, kind of like honestly like a therapy session.
Yeah.
Like working with the practitioner to get to your goal.
Yeah. Well, speaking of therapy, the show being titled The Holistic Ritual, holistic living is something that I know is really important to the listeners. And I've talked about this many times on here and on TikTok and social media. But can you just explain how and why mental health and the correlation between like our overall well-being?
Yeah. Yeah. The first word that comes to mind is integral. Mental health is not separate to physical health. And I often think our society focuses so much on the physical health piece, the eating well, the moving your body, going to the doctor. And we think, oh, then you go to this side separate thing and go to therapy or get medication over here. But it really has a direct impact. We think about, chronic illness, a lot of it is related, or like inflammations, anything like that is related to your mental health. So oftentimes we think someone is experiencing a physical symptom, we just need to hone in on physical symptom, medication, diet, exercise. And really what we're learning is that going to therapy, processing your emotions. And I also want to preface that me saying you should go to therapy is such a privileged statement. Not everyone has access to it. Not everyone has, the funds for it. So there are more ways than one to receive that mental health support than just going to a therapist. However, obviously it's amazing if you can do that. I just think it's all interconnected. And I think we're on the right path in a lot of ways with, like behavioral health being in hospitals and working on like an interconnected healthcare team is so important. I just still think there's such a hyper focus on exercise diet. And it's like, no, crying will do a lot for you.
Yeah.
And meditating. And it's these things that I think we still, I don't know if demonize is the right word, but kind of think is like, oh, what's meditation going to do for I'm in fucking pain. Like,
right.
You cuss on here, or is that okay?
Yeah. No, cuss. Cuss all you want.
Like, what is a little meditation going to do? Or what is talking to someone going to do? And it's like, it really does change everything. Emotions, energy is stored in your body, good, bad, or otherwise. And we have to regularly process that. And there's more ways to process than one. We don't have to sit down and talk about our most traumatic experiences. Actually, sometimes that can be more harmful than good. There's somatic therapy. There's EMDR. There's psychedelic therapy. There's so many really cool therapies out there that I think we just have to keep talking about them to destigmatize.
Yes.
But it's so integral in our physical health. And oftentimes clients will come in and they'll talk about, a physical symptom or a chronic condition. And I'm very sensitive with this topic. I don't come out the gate and say, oh, it's because of this mental health thing or a trauma that you experience. However, eventually I like to bring that up. Have you ever thought about the interconnectedness of it before? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's studies that come out that as women, we have a higher risk of, chronic conditions, inflammation, because of like what we hold in, the secrets that we hold.
Yes. Yeah.
It's mind-blowing and it's sad, and I think it's also empowering that it's like when we scream, when we voice in communities, when we share our stories in safe spaces, that also is healing work.
Yes. Yeah. Crying is and screaming and things, I think, after holding in so many different emotions for so long can be, I think, a form of therapy. So
Absolutely.
you talked about not everyone having access to be able to go to a therapist. Finances are an issue for some people, something that is lower cost or free forms of therapeutic techniques or therapy that people can utilize and access if they don't have access to be able to go to see a therapist.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thought that comes to mind are books, podcasts, YouTube videos, and really there are so many great ethical practitioners out there. I feel called to say there are so many people that you can trust on the internet. Just being mindful still that just because it's a free resource doesn't mean that it's your resource. But I think there's so many. We just didn't have this. I mean, I'm only 29, but I didn't have this growing up. And I'm thinking about even older generations, but the access we have now about, you get on TikTok, you Google somatic therapy, someone's teaching you an exercise.
Yeah.
Go to your public library. Hopefully there's a book in there about, somatic therapy or anxiety or whatever you're searching for. I think just really thinking, okay, what's at my fingertips right now? Do you have access to a phone? Do you have access to the internet? Do you have access to a library? And never forgetting the power of community. Talking to your friend is not the same as talking to a therapist. However, expression is expression is expression. And if you feel safe with someone, we have to utilize that.
Yeah.
I think we can get into a little bit of a hyper independent culture and very individualistic and forget about the power of a pal, honestly,
Yeah.
for your mental health.
Yeah. It's making me think about another question. I know you and I are both very for women empowerment. And I think what you just said there is like utilizing a friend. And the people that I'm thinking about who are coming to mind are men right now, and how November is Men's Mental Health Month too. But what do you see, I guess, as far as like men therapy clients or just men who they don't have the maybe self-awareness, or they feel just like through society like they cannot talk about their feelings or emotions, which is it's so sad, and like they don't have that deep connection like women typically tend to have. What can men do to help themselves, you know?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And I don't see a lot of men as my therapy clients. My clientele is mostly women and non-binary people, genderqueer people, and it is very stigmatized for men to have emotion. I mean, not even with other people. Yes, with other people, but with themselves, privately, by themselves, have like crying. I think of just all the different how we talk about men in our lives. We're like, I've only seen them cry once, and it was because their parent passed away. It's these very like traumatic experiences, and it's very notable when we see a man have these experiences. And for some reason, I was thinking about like men who have this camaraderie with sports, and men can talk and socialize and have this community,
Mhm.
and they talk about these more surface things and they're diving into them, and what they're actually doing is searching for that emotional connection, but in a way that is societally acceptable. And I'm not saying this is every man. There are men out there that are comfortable expressing their emotions. However, what I've seen and what we typically see in society is that they stick to the safer topics. You know, I've dated men with their friends where the man I'm dating is going through something traumatic or difficult, and the people closest to him have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's that shame, and it's the kind of like someone has to go first. Like if 3 guys are sitting there and someone's like, "I'm depressed right now," someone's gonna have to take it there and demonstrate it first, and I really feel like that's what kinda breaks the wall and then shows the other men, "It's okay to go here.
Yeah.
In fact, we should go here," because it's not only healthy for the men, but in the people in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, we've seen so like, a lot of the violence and there was a trend on TikTok that was, like, man versus bear, who you gonna choose for women? And, like, it's so sad that that's where we are. But I think, you made a really good point there that men almost, like, need to be brave, it sounds like, to be the first one to be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this." Do you think that if men decided to share with their friends that they would be met with the same, transparency and understanding as when they decided to be the brave one?
I think men would be surprised. Obviously, everyone is different, and all genders struggle with vulnerability. Not every single person, but all genders do. Um, and 9 times out of 10, people are surprised when they open up and hear the response of I I'm kinda getting the analogy of it's like when you post something vulnerable online, you're like, "This happened to me," and people are like, "Me," "Me too."
Yeah.
There's such power across the board of being vulnerable. It really is being brave to go first, and I also think practicing vulnerability in smaller spaces, which is why therapy is so amazing, is because you get to practice on a hopefully unbiased person, non-judgmental, safe person
Yeah.
of saying the scary things and starting out small. You don't have to disclose the hardest thing you've been through. You can if you feel safe to do that.
Yeah.
But just like, "This work week sucked. I'm burnt out. I'm feeling, like, really exhausted, tired." Just doing it in small doses really again, it's a muscle, strengthening that vulnerability muscle.
Yeah. I think there's so much power in vulnerability, and, I mean, as humans, like, that's how we bond with each other. That's how we form those, like, deeper connections is by sharing, not just, our traumas are the worst thing that's ever happened to us, but the good moments too. And I just see like there being not just with men, but just with people who they don't want to face their own emotions. Like what would you say are consequences for that?
Like, keeping emotions suppressed. Yeah, I think there's and I don't wanna, fear monger. However, there are consequences to keeping things inside. I would say your mental health suffering is one of them, addiction being present. What we resist persists, and unfortunately, there is no way out other than through with talking about, what needs to be talked about. It is also a basic need of humans to be witness. I think it's just there's a more than anything, an emotional consequence of not being seen. We think that emotional validation and having space held for us emotionally is like, again, this other need, but it is a basic level need. We think about when a parent holds their newborn, it's a necessity that they hold them, that they, activate their nervous system and let their body know, "Hey, you're safe." And there are
Mhm.
consequences when, a child doesn't receive that. Um, but I also feel called to say if you have been holding something inside, if you haven't been sharing, you're not doomed forever. Things like this are, I guess I want to say, irreversible or can progress. Just because you've never shared doesn't mean you're doomed forever. You can start in small ways, but I really think the consequence is you emotionally suffer when you hold it in, and you don't want that. And I don't want that for you. No one wants that for you.
Yeah. I think being seen.
Yeah.
There are people who don't want to be seen, but because of, things that they've been through and experienced, and so I think you touching on that is also just a really good point.
Yeah.
What are some techniques that you use in therapy with clients to help them overcome like anxiety and stress?
Anxiety and stress specifically. I really like to take a holistic approach to that. So, looking at every area of your life, I like to talk about boundaries. I like to talk about capitalism, truly, like how much are you giving? Where can you say no? I really take a feminist perspective of looking at the systems you're involved in, the marginalization that you're a part of, because I think I can give you all the hot tips in the world of which are still great. I'm not counting it out, of meditation, deep breathing, somatic exercises, really focusing on your mind body connection. Yoga is great for anxiety and stress. I think it's a disservice if I don't look at the client from a holistic perspective and say, okay, what's your race? What's your gender? What's your age? What's your financial status? What's your trauma history? Because I feel as though that removes a lot of pressure and stress of what could I be doing? What could I be doing? What could I be doing? When it can be empowering, or maybe not even empowering, but give context of why you have so much anxiety. Yeah. Yeah, so I would think, honestly, validation and looking at the systems you're a part of is first, and then from there, we can say, "Okay, what's in your control?" Is it setting a boundary with your parent who's calling you every single day and it's draining you?
Oh, no.
Is it that was just an example.
Not a personal
Yeah, no,
example, yeah.
that was just pulled out of a hat right there. Is it, telling your boss you can't work Saturdays when you've been saying you can? So, talking about trauma responses and conditioning. Where are you deriving your worth from? And then how is that related to your anxiety and stress? So it can go so many ways. To me, it really is, yeah, taking that holistic approach, seeing what's in your control. And a lot of the times there's more tangible steps that we can take than we think.
Mhm.
It's just about taking the first step.
Yeah, I would say a large part of my following are people who potentially do struggle with anxiety and stress. I mean, I feel like in general, people to some degree, we all experience some type of stress or anxiety just at different levels. But I also want to ask you, like, how do you incorporate tarot and the spiritual side? I will say I leave it as an option to my clients. So I do have some spiritual clients who want to talk about what moon cycle we're in, or if there's a new moon and how it's impacting them, or how, they're demonstrating this certain behavior and it's because of something that relates back to their birth chart. So it really is like the spiritual component of being a spiritual therapist for me is it's like an add-on. If you want to do strictly clinical mental health, like you can be agnostic, like you can be Christian, you can be anything, and we don't have to operate from a spiritual lens, and I often think that sometimes we overthink spirituality. Spirituality is how we're connected to the earth, it's how we're connected to each other, and my personal framework. So oftentimes I'm taking a spiritual approach and it's the client doesn't even maybe wouldn't even count that as a spiritual approach, but with my clients who maybe aren't coming to the forefront and being like, I picked you out as a therapist because you're spiritual, I will do things like guided meditation. Okay, let's call in your highest self. How are they feeling about this? What's a day in their life look like? I do a lot of visualization, a lot Oh,
of speaking from a sort of a different perspective, which to me feels very spiritual, of thinking about like a timeline of your past self, your present self, your future self. I don't typically incorporate tarot in my mental health in my therapy sessions. I absolutely will. Like, I am really wanting clients who want to do that.
Yeah.
I will say in the past when I have incorporated tarot into therapy sessions, it's less from a channeled intuitive approach where I'm like accessing. I feel like my intuition is always available to me in my therapy sessions, but it's less like here's a channeled message and more like, okay, here's the card, here's what it typically means. What does that mean for you? You know, what does this imagery bring up? What does it remind you of? I often use dream work. I had a client recently, and I went on this whole tangent. I was like, you have to start tracking your dreams. Like, dreams are so important. So I use dream work a lot to uncover things from the subconscious, which I feel like is spiritual, because I feel like dreams are a way for your brain to process, but it's also a way for the spirit realm to contact you and give you messages. So
Yeah.
there's a lot in dreams for sure.
Oh man. Okay. I personally have gnarly ass dreams, like all the time, very vivid. One time I had this dream where I was in like 1983 or something. And one of my coworkers was like, "Oh, you totally like astro traveled."
I was
Like,
gonna be like, is that a past life?
well, the thing that was creepy about the dream was that I was in this like 1980s mall, but I was dressed in like 2024 clothing.
Whoa.
So I was like walking around and I went up to someone and I was like, "Hey, like what year is it or something?" And they're like, "You're not supposed to be here." And everyone in the dream just turned to look at me. And I like have goosebumps right now because it was like so creepy. Yes.
Cool. I mean, your soul was going back in time. What do you make of it?
I
Or is it still
I
like
don't
just like,
know.
I don't know,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, the person who told me I wasn't supposed to be there was like an older man. Like his presence though wasn't like creepy or
Yeah.
like scary. It was
Yeah.
very like comforting.
Mhm.
And I was that's the person who I went up to and I was like, "Oh, um like what year is it?" And yeah, so but my question though is like sometimes I think I read somewhere like dreams are a way for us to process things like subconsciously. So that's why they're so important. But what do you make of like people who either don't have dreams or like they're having dreams that they can't necessarily maybe they don't know like how they're even correlated with what they're experiencing or what is going on in their life currently?
Yeah. People who don't dream, I don't really know what to make of that. I can have a couple different of my, I guess, my own theories. My first thought is if you want to dream, maybe it's something where you say like an affirmation or a prayer or whatever you say like before bed, like see if the universe brings you a dream, because maybe it's a like a consensual thing. Um where maybe your spirit team doesn't know that's how you want to receive messages. But I also think that like medication, or I know sometimes who maybe people who smoke weed, like they won't get dreams if they're high, or they do get dreams, or they get dreams when they drink and they don't drink. So it could be like substance related, medication related. I don't really know. I always find it shocking just in general because just like you, every single night my mind is popping off. Last night I had a dream about two ex-boyfriends, a guy from my past, friends from my past. And what I do is like when I wake up, I immediately go to my journal. So getting to your next part of your question is if you don't know what to make of your dreams and it's like, oh, that's so weird. I was like a clown in a shower and that doesn't make sense. Just write it all down. Sometimes our brains are just literally brains and just pull something from maybe we saw on the TV or whatever. But sometimes there are coded messages that aren't so nail on the head. So I would just start writing them down. I swear to God, I will go back like as I'm reflecting on past relationships and stuff, and I will type someone's name in my notes app, and I will have dreams from like 2 years ago and be like, oh, that's what that was trying to tell me. They are powerful way to access our intuition.
Now that also reminds me of, I think I saw somewhere that they just did a study where 2 people were being studied and they were able to contact each other in their dreams.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was, like, the first known, um, time that humans were even able to do that, and I'm like, "How much of our brains are we not utilizing if we're able to do that and we're just now discovering that?" Or,
Yes.
like,
It
it's
reminds me of,
so
like, the
wild.
ocean, like,
Yeah.
there's so much we don't know.
Oh god, the ocean freaks me
Me
out.
too, me too.
Oh
And,
my
like,
god,
sleep, that's so weird. We're all, like, just going throughout the day, and then we just fall down and go to sleep, and then we go different places, our soul travels. I mean, no, it's I could do a whole 5-hour thing on this. It's wild.
well, maybe we'll have to have you back and just talk about dreams.
Oh, that'd be fun, yeah.
Okay, so going back to tarot, what's your, like, one-liner elevator pitch for tarot for people who have no idea, like, what it is? I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I'm no longer Catholic, I'm agnostic, but there's, like, family members of mine who would be like, "Oh, tarot's, like, witchcraft," or, like, "It's the devil's cards," or something, and it's just like now, I mean, it just seems so silly to me. Hopefully, I don't offend anybody by that, but, like, it just seems like there are things beyond our understanding, and, like, there are the unseen and a power that is greater than us, whoever you wanna call that, like, God, goddess, source energy, whatever. But yeah, that's a long-winded way to ask you about tarot.
I love this question. In short, it is a deck of cards. They only have meaning if you want to give them meaning, and as you're talking about that, the phrase that came through was, "What you go searching for, you will find." So if you want to connect with darker energies, evil forces, whatever that means, I'm sure you can find that. I don't know, I don't operate in that lane, and just because I pull out a deck of tarot cards does not mean something's jumping out. I grew up Christian, and I got the same messages. On my spiritual journey, when I started, like, in 2020, I'm just like, What's a crystal? What's astrology?" I started tarot was the last thing on my list because I would just look at those cards and be like my messaging was so strong of, "These are scary, this is bad." And, my partner at the time just bought me a deck for Christmas, and that was, like, my form of I mean, tarot really helped with my mental health, my spirituality, my deepening to my intuition. I feel as though as a trauma survivor, that was such a helpful tool to be like, "Okay, I'm feeling this thing. There's a card that means, what I'm feeling." So, it's a deck of cards. Each card has a specific meaning of what we go through as humans. One card is about love, self-love, nurturing others. Another card is about hard work, grinding, putting an effort towards something. It's things that we experience, I would say, all over the world. It's about relationships, it's about grief, it's about joy, it's about heartbreak, it's about suffering. It's all the things that we experience in card form. And what's so powerful from a like purely psychological standpoint, it pulls up themes that maybe we're suppressing. So,
That'll
the card 10 of cups comes out. It's a card about your deepest fulfillment, your wish fulfillment. And so when maybe you see it and you're talking about being a parent and you see this card and you're like, "Okay, I actually do wanna be a parent. That's something that would deeply satisfy me." So it's cards to connect to your body and your intuition of what you already know. The
Yeah.
power is not within these cards, the power is within you. It's simply an oracle. It's just like if someone uses the Bible, if someone uses journaling, if someone uses, a pendulum, it's a tool to connect with yourself, and if you want to view it as the divine as well, God, universe, source, spirit, I use all those words interchangeably, something outside of
Same.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, also, tarot was the last thing that I incorporated, yes, on my spiritual woo-woo witchy crystal girly journey. Um, but first it was meditation and then journaling and crystals and incense. And then I started doing like new moon rituals and things like that. And then I know it's like said that in order to get into tarot, I've heard that you can only be gifted a deck.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like that. And so I bought my own deck.
Yep, as you should.
I was like, I'm curious about this. Like, I want to like not draw for other people, but just for myself. And I always write down anytime that I pull tarot cards. And it really is like, in my experience, reaffirming what I kind of already knew or like what I maybe thought I was on the fence about, but it's in plain language for me. That's like reassurance. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what you are like, just getting that like confirmation, I guess. So I think it's beautiful that you incorporate that into your practice. And then, yeah, you also mentioned it helping you through trauma.
Mhm.
Can you say a little bit more about that just for listeners who maybe are interested in using tarot to help them through that?
Yeah. Yeah, I know this is a common experience with trauma survivors is being maybe robbed of your inherent intuition. For me, some stories that I've struggled with, and don't take this on if it's not yours, but just personally, how did I miss this? How did I, um, not trust that intuitive feeling? And I feel like it's never your fault for something that someone else has done to you. Unfortunately, there have been for me just like stories ingrained in my head about I can't trust myself. And so having a tangible tool to start reconnecting with my body and my soul and to have that confirmation and be like, even if it's as simple as like, I'm getting a weird vibe from work. Like, spirit, what should I do about my job? I will never forget my first therapy job. I was burnout, underpaid, exploited, kind of going a different direction here, but just to give an example, I was like, "What should I do about this?" Every day I was pulling the tower, and it was such a clear
Wow.
confirmation of, like, I knew I needed to go. I knew I was being exploited, I knew it wasn't right for how I was being treated at this workplace, and tarot was simply a tool to be like, "Yeah, you're feeling it correctly." So it's we wanna be careful not to rely on it so heavily to make every single decision, but I pull out my cards every single day. Like, they are a very big support for me and a very big validator. It's literally, again, a similar feeling to going to therapy and being like, "I'm so hurt by what my partner did," and the therapist saying, "Yeah, I mean, that sounds hurtful." We just need that, like, external validation, and that's
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah.
No, I absolutely love that you said it's a way to reconnect with your body and yourself
And
and a way to start trusting yourself again.
yeah.
I also had an experience where I dated a narcissist,
Yeah.
um, very, very heavy narcissistic person. Um, and that was a really big thing for me after that relationship was I had well, one, I had no idea what the fuck just happened to me. So I started, researching like what is narcissism and like went down the whole rabbit hole. I don't know if you have heard of Dr. Romney
Yeah.
before.
Mhm,
Oh
mhm.
my gosh. I like binged her YouTube videos
Yeah.
just to try to make sense of what happened to me. And I felt like a shell of a person. And one of the biggest things was I was like, how could I let this happen to me? How could I not like trust myself and my intuition? And like every time like I would get a bad feeling or a gut feeling that's like, this is wrong. You shouldn't have a partner who's like saying these things to you or doing these things to you. And I would always, override that. And I would always be like, no, it's just in your head. And so I think having that as a tool, just maybe like spirituality in the sense of like journaling and
Yeah.
then later on incorporating tarot, but learning to retrust myself, I feel like that was such a huge, thing. And I feel like that is a big thing for people who have experienced trauma and PTSD and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And it is such a horrible feeling to internalize that. And sometimes it feels sort of inevitable that those stories happen. And just to be very clear, it's never the person who's abused fault. It's always the abusers. However, it is a very common experience. I know you know this. I'm just kind of speaking to you generally to like recount what could I have done differently. I watched this really good Call Her Daddy episode this week with who's the actress off of I'm so bad with actors and actresses. Of Pitch Perfect. The episode just came out. I can look actually so I can do this correctly.
Yes, no, I can picture her face.
Yep.
I just can't
I
picture
literally just watched.
what her name is.
Not Halsey. Anna Kendrick.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So I watched that episode recently and she talks about an abusive relationship and it was so validating. I've recently come to terms that I've experienced emotional abuse and it's like it's so disorienting. And she says something that she says like maybe this sounds grim, but you can watch all the TikToks, we can talk about as women all the red flags and you still may miss it. Like someone who wants to hurt someone is going to hurt someone. And I know that sounds dark. And the way that she said it, you'll have to watch the episode. It conveys a very big, like, we put so much responsibility on ourselves to see these things. And okay, they bought me dinner. It was $100 on the first date, or they love bombing me. You know, it's like we're constantly in our head and doing these loops. And I think it's important that we continue to do that, have a healthy level of vigilance, I guess, and compassion that sometimes that people do bad things and it's not our fault.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that can be so challenging in the dating world, especially if you are someone who comes from a trauma background or has had PTSD, but and also just for people being single in general, transitioning into, like, relationships and stuff, for all of, the singles out there, we kinda talked about just, like, red flags and if someone wants to hurt someone, they're going to, but, um, lightening the mood a little bit or
Right, right.
that's kinda how I feel. What are some, like, green flags that
Yeah.
singles should be looking for?
Yeah, I think looking at first knowing your core values is so super important. So, do you value a hard work ethic? Do you value someone who values their health? What do you value? And that gets to look different for everyone. So, I have a best friend, and one of her values is she wants someone who can stay up. We're very different in this way. She wants someone who can stay up late and kind of hang, with the best of them at 3 a.m., do spontaneous things. Because she went on a date with someone one time and was like, "Morgan, this would be your ideal person." She goes to bed at like 8. It's not like for me. So it's even lighter things like that. Where is it going to bother you to have a partner that maybe goes out more, or goes out less, or is a hermit, or is an introvert? So thinking about on the big things and the small things, what are your core values? Do you want children? So if you're on the apps, for example, don't go on a date with someone who clearly says, I don't want children.
Yeah.
Like getting very clear on what you're searching for. Is it casual? Is it, a committed monogamous relationship? And then going from there and seeing like what can you be flexible with, but what are the hard and fast lines?
There's a point in time for me that dating for potential
Yep.
was, like, a big thing, and, like, I didn't really dabble with the apps too often just 'cause I don't have the patience. I
Yeah.
I'm just like, "Where is this conversation gonna go? I'm gonna,
Right.
like, text you back and forth for a couple weeks, and then we're never gonna meet up or something."
Right.
Or people would flake, or just they would be weirdos.
Can be.
So, yeah, but so I when I met my partner now, I said, I was like, "I'm single. The only way I'm gonna meet someone is if I meet them organically." But prior to that, I had a view of like dating for potential. No one's ever going to be 100% perfect, but like dating for potential with like big things that were
Yep.
I dated this guy who was really big on like he really wanted kids,
Yeah.
but he didn't want to get married. And like at the time I was still kind of, playing around with the idea, do I want to get married? Like is marriage for me? I
Yep.
don't know. And I guess, ultimately that relationship really helped me figure out like I do want to get married and for what reasons do I want
Right.
that? Um and then I dated this girl who she basically was fresh out of a relationship and I knew that there was potential there. I was like, well, maybe this is not a rebound or whatever, but it was. But like, so with those, examples of like dating for potential, I suppose,
Mhm.
how can we as women or even as men too? I mean, I know men do this too, but
Yeah.
I feel like women are more inclined to date for potential versus like, you see all the studies of men, like they date as like someone as they are. So, but yeah, how can we not fall into that?
Is such a good question, and I can give you so many examples how I've done that too. I just made a TikTok on this. I haven't posted it yet, but earlier right, earlier 20s me would see maybe like a moderate man on Bumble, for example, and be like, "Well, maybe they mean like, you know." And now my boundary where I'm at 29 is like, if you don't have your political affiliation, if you don't have liberal in there, I'm not swiping on you because that to me is like already starting the groundwork of potential. Um, being real the brain is a funky place, and I think being very mindful with your I I'm speaking of dating apps, but you can date obviously in a lot of different ways. Just being mindful where your brain is making shit up, honestly. Like, are they actually a good person who's funny and charismatic, or have you just had a one good date with them? Being very mindful of the sort of fairy tale thing that we do specifically as women or people conditioned as women to, like, idolize someone, like, really sitting with someone's humanness that no one's gonna it sucks because the fairy tale thing is fun to fall into. I mean, we can kinda get addicted to it, and it is fun to think about falling in love. You shouldn't take out the playfulness and the loveliness of it, and let's stay grounded 2 feet in. You've only had 2 dates, you don't really know them.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think having this kind of, um like, best friend dialogue, that's how I kind of bring my friends into reality, and they bring me too. I'm not the only I can get lost in Delulu land.
We
Um
all can.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think the big word is, like, just staying mindful, staying 10 toes down on it takes a long time to know someone. You don't really know someone unless you've, met the people in their life, unless you've went through a crisis. You have to see people in all these different forms, and that takes a while. So, like, take it slow with the dating
Yeah.
process and suss someone out and let them suss you out.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a good point too, is I when I was younger, I used to be so concerned if like, well, are they gonna like me? Like, am I
Yep.
am I doing everything
Right.
right? Like, am I saying everything
Am
right?
I
And it's
being
like,
hot? Am I being cool?
right, yeah. And
No.
now, well, not now because I'm with someone, but
Yeah.
prior to meeting him, it was like, do I even like them? Like, do I like what they're saying? Do I like how they are allowing space and room for me to speak to a former friend of mine? We always used to talk about like, was the date really a good time? Or was it me carrying the conversation and just being the one who was asking all the questions? But I thought it was a good time because they were enjoying my company, but
Oh,
was I necessarily
oh,
enjoying their company?
been on a few of those. Yeah, where you're
Yeah.
carrying the whole date on your back and you're like, "That went well," and it's like, "Oh, wait, they didn't ask a single question about me." And it's because you're such a good question asker
Yeah, yeah,
that
literally.
they're having a time of their life because 'cause they're getting all the attention. And, like, going back to what we said, like, being seen, we love it as humans.
Mhm.
But, yeah, if there's a not an imbalance, no, not gonna work.
Yeah, plain and simple,
Right.
no. What do you think about the sentiment that you need to love yourself first before you can entertain a relationship or a partnership?
I think that sentiment, I can see both sides of it. I think we have to walk a fine line of we don't need to be perfect in order to be loved. We don't need to have it all together. We get to be ugly and messy and have our shadow sides out while dating, while being loved, while being pursued or pursuing someone. And if you don't have a relationship to yourself, you're going to meet people exactly where you've met yourself. And so if you're only keeping it surface with you, that's as far as your relationships. You can only meet people as much as you met yourself. So if you're looking for that surface relationship, then that's what you're looking for. But if you are looking for someone to be a partner who knows your soul and the depths of your being, you're going to have to look in the mirror. And unfortunately, trauma does and hard events do impact us. Our childhood does impact us. And relationships are our biggest triggers. So unless we know what those triggers are and what we experience thoroughly, they're going to get activated eventually in your relationships. Friendships too, all types of relationships.
So we're both bisexual, and I know in the LGBTQ space, it can feeling like we're isolated. We have our own, set of unique challenges that we face being in the LGBTQ community. What do you think are some of those like unique challenges?
Yeah. We live in a monosexual society. So people, even if they're cool with queer people, it makes sense for you to be fully gay, fully lesbian, or straight. We live in a society that does not like nuance or fluidity. And so bisexuality inherently challenges that, where we live on a spectrum, and my bisexuality is different than yours, and yours is different than the next bi person. And so I feel like it can be really isolating in both hetero spaces and queer spaces. I've been seeing a lot of stuff on TikTok lately about, there was this funny, I'm doing quotes if you're not watching the video of this two lesbians, and they're like, oh no, like how to scare a bi girl, like basically be a lesbian. And it's so frustrating because I understand what some lesbians are saying. Some lesbians do get hurt from bi people, but that's an individual situation. That's not all bisexual people. That's not most of us.
Yeah.
I think it's really unfair to pigeonhole us, that bi women specifically always want to be with men and we just, use women. I think it's really dangerous. I think it's really hurtful. I think that anyone in any sexuality, straight, queer, lesbian, can hurt other people.
Yes.
Through again, not acknowledging their own self. It's just, I feel really invalidated in the queer space sometimes. And I hate that I feel like more validated because I dated a woman long term. It shouldn't have to be like that to have like street cred or have to like show. I feel like bi people have to like show who they dated and who they slept with and, like explain themselves.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely resonate with that, and just feeling like while the queer community can be very welcoming and very warm and very
For sure.
understanding, the other side of that, um, I guess more specifically as a bi person, is being misunderstood in both communities
Yeah.
of heterosexuality and then in the queer space. It just sometimes it feels like no one understands. Like, no one understands us. No one understands me. Just feeling really alone sometimes.
Right.
What advice would you offer to people who do feel misunderstood and alone, as a bi person or just in the queer space in general?
Yeah, I think seeking out bisexual resources specifically, queer spaces are so important and so helpful. And yeah, I totally agree. 9 times out of 10, I'm having a positive experience in a queer space, it really is that like when I'm seeing these harmful messages, it's online rhetoric. There's a book called Greedy by Jen, I forget their last name. But it's a really great book about being bisexual. So yeah, seeking out bisexual specific resources, friends. Like I sought you out when I saw your Instagram because I saw you were bi.
That's how we met.
Yeah.
On Instagram.
Yeah. And my bi friends get it more than, you know, when I've hung out with lesbians or when I've hung out with straight people. And just like with anyone's sexuality, that's no shade to anyone. It's just people get each other's experience when they've experienced it. I love being bisexual. I think it's so fun. And I think that while it is still deeply misunderstood by some, I really think we are gaining more understanding and seeking to understand that. I like to say like bisexuality is how I live my life. It's fluidity, it's multifaceted, it's not pigeonholing yourself.
What's something that you would say to a person, either personally or from, you know, putting on your therapist hat, to someone who is dating a bi person? And what are some like biphobic things that you've heard people say in that dating space where they didn't really know, or like they didn't really understand like how whatever they said, or like they misunderstood that it is biphobic?
Yep. Yeah, I think the most important thing is listen to your bisexual partner of their experience. Ask them, how does your sexuality show up? How do you experience your sexuality? Do you feel more romantically attracted to a certain gender? Do you feel more sexually attracted to a certain gender? And just listen. I think with, again, like bi women specifically, so listening to your partner's experience. And I think the most important thing, seeking to be curious about your partner's experience, asking questions, getting curious, and listening with an open heart, being non-judgmental. I think for bi women specifically, whatever gender we're with, I've noticed it can be an insecurity with that person that we wish we were with another gender, and that's not the case. For a lot of us who are maybe monogamous want to be with who we're with, and oftentimes it just feels like just like a straight person. When two people, a man and a woman, get married, they're not often thinking, oh, would you just want to be with any other man? Like we get put into questioning, and it's okay if you have insecurities come up as a partner. Like, you know, insecurities are understandable. And again, going back to like, listen to what your partner's telling you, listen to what your partner is saying to you, get curious, but never assume. And I think with bi women, something I want to bring up is people think that we're only attracted to women sexually, that like we want to be with men long term or for the long haul. And if that's how your sexuality is showing up in that time, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And we sexualize women to the point where we think that bi women are just wanting to have sex with each other. It's like, no, we're going on dates. We're forming emotional connections. We're courting each other just like y'all are, probably even more so in some aspects. It's not purely sexual. And I think with sexuality too, just a general conversation, we focus so much on sex.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's about the relationship building. It's about all the other aspects of relationships, just like hetero couples.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been so pissed off. I'm casually will mention like I'm bi, and someone will be like, oh, when are you gonna have a threesome? Or when do you want to have a threesome with, you know, whatever. And it's just like, it's so insulting to me. And it's like, is that all you think of bi people? Is we just want to have threesomes all the time?
Right.
Like,
It is insulting. And just because you're bi doesn't mean you want to be having sex or you want to be having a certain type of sex. There are bi people who aren't at me, who aren't having sex.
oh, that's okay too.
Like, you're bi no matter what. And maybe bi people do want to have threesome, but it's an individual preference, just like everyone in the world, no matter what label you're rocking with, if you're even rocking with a label, you have an individual sexuality. We all have sexuality. It's not just queer people.
Morgan, I could talk to you for hours. I really could, about just so many things. And we're just so aligned on just spirituality and feminism and being bi and just so many things.
Yeah.
But we have to wrap up.
We must.
We must. Our brains, y'all, are just going to mush as this goes on. But okay, to close out, what's one thing you want listeners to take away from this episode? And then where can everyone find you and find more about your work and where they can work with you?
Mm-hmm. Being you is the bravest thing you can do. That's what I want you to walk away with. And you can find me, my personal Instagram. I just kind of all leave it together. It's at Morgan O'Neill, 3 L's, 1 underscore. And then to work with me, it's growingrosetherapy.org. And my Substack is the Bisexual Agenda, ironically enough. So go subscribe, please. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.